what's up guys? We might have a job for you here that we're going to do hot on the primary, basically rubber gloving. We don't see that often on my channel because I've got this tiny little trouble truck that's not certified for doing rubber glove work. Every once in a while we get a chance, but here's what we got. So someone reported a floating phase. If we look up at the 3-phase, that field phase just sitting there swaying back and forth in the wind. Right now there's almost no wind at all, but if wind picks up again this weekend, that's going to swing right into that center face. So we got to get that fella tied in before the weekend. Be a super easy permit. Take the line out, put our grounds on, tie that in. Wouldn't take long. But this is a main feeder right out of the sub. In fact, Substation, once we dump that, it feeds an industrial park. It's going to have quite an impact on the customers. So we're going to try to avoid that. If we have to open the line, of course, never an issue. But we can safely tie that in while energized. It's about as easy as the job can get when you're talking about rubber glove work. So right now, I'm just trying to get some flaggers because we're on a pretty busy road here. Just pulled off the side. The rubber glove truck, the knuckle of that truck is going to be right over the main road. A lot of transports go by on this road. So we don't want to have that knuckle over the roadway. So we are going to need some traffic control. Trying to line that up. It is Friday. We're going into the weekend. It's still a lot of New Year's vacation stuff going on. It's going to be hard to find some guys, but we should be able to figure something out. And what we'll try and do, we'll try to capture that. There's a few things I really want to show you guys. One of them, for example, when we tie that phase in, we're going to grab it with a jib. That's going to be locked in the jib to control that phase as we bring it down onto the pin. What happens if the guy in the bucket, if there's an incident, passes out, heart attack, gets electrocuted, if there's an incident, we can't get him down to the bucket because that phase is tied in. So you always have two guys up in the air so one can release the phase in the event of an accident. And also we've got a contraption that fastens onto the jib that the guy in the ground can use the extendo stick, grab hold of a great big ring, so in a panic you can easily get your hammerhead in there, release that phase. Also there's a few different procedures as far as covering your second point of contact when we tie that in. And the last thing is we have to take a hold off in the line. Basically a hold off is we remove the reclosing at the substation so that there's only one shot. If that phase swings and hits something, when the line trips out, it's not going to reclose 2 or 3 times. It's going to lock out on the very first shot. A reclosing or a hold off is required at all times when we do live line work, hands-on rubber glove stuff, bare hand work, and even some stick work. If you're transferring an entire structure with sticks, again, we would take a hold off. We would remove that reclosing. So, don't have a plan quite together yet. I'm here by myself. We need a truck, we need some guys, we need some flaggers. But we're gonna get on the horn, see if we can't get this all lined up. It's cold, freezing cold out there today. All right, we got a bit of a plan together. Only thing we're missing is our flaggers. We don't have them yet, but we've got 2 guys. We've got a hotline truck on its way, a rubber glove truck, and we've got our hold off, our permission for hold off. The hold off itself is not in effect yet. Those are the feeder cables there, running from our switchgear underground out onto the feeder. Normal open, another set of feeder cables. So basically these guys are heading off to the left. These guys are heading off to the right. There's a tie switch there in the middle. All of our controls are inside this building here. So this is the inside of the switchgear. All kinds of dangerous stuff in here, which I've got to be very careful as to what I show for security reasons. What you're seeing on this wall behind me, a whole lot of relays for various actions, faults that happen on the line, as well as some controls for the 138 kV switches. And on this wall to my right, these are all breakers, high voltage breakers. These breakers are actually acting as reclosers. These breakers will auto reclose. So we're going to remove the reclosing on the breaker for the line that I'm working on. You can see they're all labeled station service. That's basically the AC power for this building. And then we've got all of our breakers labeled B007, 1, 2, 3. This is our guy right here. You may have noticed when we walked in, we've got a whole lot of batteries behind us. That's in the event of a major outage where we lose our AC. We still want to have power to control all these switches and devices. So what'll happen is the power will switch over to that DC battery bank. Now, in order for the reclosing function to work, for the line to trip out, we do need power for that. So before we remove the reclosing and go to work, we need to verify that the continuity is good in the AC power to this building. All right, so I've got some equipment here that shows, I can show this quick shot. DC voltage from our battery bank, we're up to 130 volts, so we're good there. And then there should be an indicator for our AC somewhere here. Actually, I'll show you guys this too. This is our station service 2, so we do have a backup station service. So there's a station service 1, station service 2, as well as our battery backup right behind me. This panel in front of me is monitoring one of the power transformers, 125 volts, 124, 125. That's obviously after it passes through the PT. So if you multiply that by whatever the ratio is to get up to 138,000 volts, you'll be able to figure out exactly how much voltage is on that. Anytime there's a device in the substation, in a switchgear in the field, where there's something wrong, maybe, I mean, if it's wrong enough that it's a safety issue, we'll take the device out of service. But sometimes there might be something fairly trivial, like a normal open switch that can't be used, it needs to be realigned or something, and we'll put a yellow tag on it, like this guy here, with an explanation as to what's going on. So basically, you can't operate that handle because that yellow tag's on there. You can't operate any of these handles, in fact, without first talking to the power system operator. Okay, so we've got 123 volts on our AC side as well. So we're going to remove the reclosing on this particular feeder, and then we're going to tag it with this tag right here: do not operate, live line work is in process. That's going to be right on the device to remove the reclosing. And then on the back side, we've got a whole lot of information with the crews that are on site, contact information, etc. I can't show exactly how to remove the reclosing, but there is a light that comes on once it's removed. So we do want to confirm our location, 6507B003. We're going to remove the reclosing, and the hotline tag indicator has come up, and we'll install our tag in place here. I'm just taking a shot down along the wall. Again, for security purposes, I don't want anyone to see how these switches are identified or operated. But in behind each of these panels on each feeder, these doors open up, and there's a huge breaker. Basically, it's been a while since I've had one open. I'm gonna say 5-6 feet tall maybe, and it's jammed in. There's these great big connectors, probably bigger than my fist, that jam into tubes that actually connect with the buswork in behind. And if ever you're working on the portion of the line between this building, those cables, for example, going out to the line, you've got to remove that breaker for your visual disconnect. You can't rely on the internal mechanism being open. So we do what is called racking out the breaker. In order to rack out the breaker, there's a few devices laying around. We got this thing with a big wheel on the end, and there's usually a pry bar laying around. This guy right here. So there's a hole in the side of the breaker, and what happens is you shove that in the hole, and this thing will grab into a rail on the floor, and then you come backwards and you pry back, and it'll drag the breaker out, and then you lock that into the next groove and just keep working your way back, and then I'll slowly work the breaker out of place. I'd love to show you guys how to actually do that maybe someday. We used to do that. We used to have that as our responsibility as linemen. As safety has progressed over the years, you're required to wear a full bomb suit now when racking out a breaker, and our company and many others. So if I have to rack out that breaker, we call the subtechs. They got the bomb suits on their truck. They come in, they actually do the racking out of the breaker. So I haven't been part of that process for quite a few years now. But we do have our hold off in effect. Crews are on their way, and let's head back to the job site and see if we've got any traffic control yet. So our next step in this job is to report back to our dispatch that we have removed the auto reclosing service. I can't roll this one off the tongue as easy as the permits because I don't take hold offs very often. Okay, 10-4. So at Boulevard Sub, I'd like to report that continuity checked out okay. So I removed from service the automatic reclosing on 6507B003 and tagged both breaker and reclosing control handles with hold off tag 147037.
10-4, Aaron, you say at Boulevard Sub continuity checked out okay, so you move from service the automatic reclosing on 6507B003 and installed hold off tag 147037 on the breaker and reclosing handle.
10-4, that is correct.
Did agree with that reclosing out of 6507B003 to tie in that floating phase at 8013 pole 115?
Yep, 10-4. I agree with the reclosing being out of 6507B003 to tie in a floating phase at 8013 pole 115.
Agree with that. So your hold off 147037 on 8013 line is approved now in effect. You can go to work, checking every couple hours and report when clear.
10-4. You said my hold off 147037 on 8013 line's been approved now in effect. We can go ahead and go to work, check in every couple hours and report when clear.
10-4, Aaron.
Perfect. And Gabe and Tyson are going to be helping me out on this one. They should be here probably within half hour or so.
They're going to be helping you on that call as well.
Yep, 10-4. I'll probably give you a shout back and, well, I'll be done 2 hours.
Aaron, 21 clear.
182 clear.
Yeah, we're on the way, Aaron. Just leaving the office.
Yeah, sounds good. I guess Daryl got some flaggers there too. They said they won't be long at all, so I'll get them set up if they're there.
Yeah, we're...
Everything is coming together super smooth. Usually that's not the case on a Friday. Let's head back to the job site and get those flaggers, the traffic control, all set up. One huge hazard I want to point out for this setup. When I was driving into the work area, couldn't see a thing. The sun was right there glaring straight at me. For the time it's going to take to wait for that sun to go down over the trees, we're not going to set up on the road. That's just asking for trouble. Drivers are not going to see our traffic control persons out in the road with that sun in their eyes. So we're going to wait till that sun dips down over the trees before we even begin to set up. We can see here now the sun has gone down over the trees, so we can get started. So let's take a closer look at the job while we're waiting for the crew to show up here. This is the structure we'll be working on, tying in that floating phase. We'll be replacing both the insulator and the pin as well. When we look down below the crossarm, we can see two wires on this pole. That one real thin wire, we call that a pilot wire. It's energized at 120 volts. That's what's feeding that street light. The next wire slightly above that is our neutral. Whenever you're doing hotline work, you do want to check the adjacent structures on either side of the work area. Last thing you want is when you have that phase in your jib and you're moving things around for it to come unattached from the pin on the other end. You want to make sure that the aluminum tie wires are not broken. Traffic is going pretty quick on this road. So that does have a preformed tie. Everything looks good on this structure here. Both structures are also taller than the structure that we're working on. That's why that phase is floating up and above. So we're gonna head over and check the other structure as well. So everything looks good on this structure as well. Tie is in place. And of course the boys will be keeping an eye on either structure, either end, as they're working on things. couple more hazards that'll be discussed in our tailboard. One, it's freezing cold outside right now. It's temperature's really dropping off. We're probably looking at about minus 14 degrees Celsius right now. And the second hazard is we're losing our daylight. We don't do much rubber glove work outside of daylight. However, we are allowed to continue the job into the dark, providing everyone on the site, providing all the crew members are comfortable doing so. There's sufficient light to complete the task at hand, and that it's a simple task. Now, a simple task is obviously up for debate, but you're not going to go transferring structures hot. You're not going to go transferring structures that were involved in a vehicle accident, broken poles. You're not going to do that hot at night, or even at all sometimes when stuff's really damaged. So we're going to have 3 guys on site. I'll be up in the air with the guy doing work as his backup in case there's an incident, so we can release the wire from the jib, and we'll have another guy on the ground that's going to keep an eye on the job area as a whole. This should go pretty quick. Basically, we're going to be covering up our second points of contact, grabbing a hold of that, and one other thing I did forget to mention was to inspect the other insulators on the pole for any cracks. You do that on any job anyways. And of course the cross arm we're tying into. One last thing we're going to do before you go up on any job again is test your rubber gloves. I will be up in the air, as I mentioned, with my 20 kV gloves, as well as a tested hot stick in case I need to release a phase from the keeper, from the jib. So in order to test the gloves, I've shown this in videos in detail, but you want to remove your covers, do your quick flip, and we're going to do an air test. Listen for any air leaking out. You want to check in between those fingers as well. But also you can see the inside of the glove is that yellow color. So if there is a split in the glove, you will see. This works pretty good actually. I can see right down the fingers on the screen. So that's just the field test for the gloves. They are professionally tested every 3 months at our company at the service center, where they're dipped into water and exposed to, I can't remember how much voltage. There's a safety factor built in. So it's our system's 12,000 volts, and it tested at 20,000, maybe a bit more. 24,000. I've got my gloves right here in the cab. I do have heated tills, but it's freezing cold out there, so I want these things to really warm up before we get started. So I'm going to leave these out of the rubber glove bag right in front of the vent and passenger seats to warm up.
So this first shot we're seeing, he's got the neutral wire in his jib. We had discussed during the tailboard that there wasn't a whole lot of room to squeeze in between the neutral and the 3-phase. So our guy was actually going to unbolt the neutral from the pole, pull it down below that pilot wire, and reattach it to the pole to gain easily an extra foot clearance as he squeezes his bucket through. But in order to do that, to bring that neutral down past that pilot wire, we've got to de-energize that pilot wire. So we thought about opening the transformer, but it ended up feeding multiple homes as well as that pilot wire. So I decided to back my truck up onto the source side where that pilot wire is attached to the pole and simply disconnect it. That way there's no power outage to any of the homes. So looking at the pole, they've got that copper weld wrapped around that spool and right into that crimp. That'd be a pain to hook back up. So I'm going to take a look on the other side of the pole, and I decide just to cut that 1/0 triplex. So I should have brought my Milwaukee cutter up here. It's a lot easier and safer to use around live stuff, but lots of room there, and I've got my 20 kV gloves on. So normally I'd also tape those ends, but I've got all kinds of room to bend them out of the way. We're working one span away. There's no way that the wire's going to fly back into that and energize that, and I'm just going to be hooking it back up in about an hour's time once the job's complete. So you can see also we've got our traffic control all set up there, completely closed down one of the lanes, and we're back on to our main job here now. So I think I mentioned a few times about our second point of contact. So when you're up there working on that 3-phase, even though you're using rubber gloves, the last thing you want is for your bucket to be in contact with a dead short with that neutral wire, especially when you're squeezing in between. So he's going to be putting 2 rubber eels on that neutral. And right here, we're just looking at the jib. You see at the back of the jib, there's that little eye at the back. Normally, if there's one guy up in the air working, we'll run in a rope, basically. It's got a tested link stick in it from the keeper back down through that eye so that the guy in the ground can open that keeper up. We don't have that in place because I'll be alongside. I won't be actually helping him with the job because I'm not a certified bucket, but I can work with a stick for my bucket. So in the event that we have to release that keeper, I can do that with that hot stick we saw a few moments ago. That's with me in the bucket.
Okay.
So the next thing here, we just saw he grabbed a hold of that phase and it did seem a little bit loose. So that old insulator and that old pin, it's not in the greatest shape. So we just decide that we're going to change that as well. Luckily we did have 2 of them on board. So again, second point of contact, the blanket he just had in place. We skipped ahead a little bit there, but he had the blanket in place on the crossarm in order to remove that tie. The primary was secured in the keeper on his jib. He had that crossarm covered up with that rubber blanket and removed that aluminum tie wire. At this point now, he's going to extend the primary pretty well as far as the jib will go. We can, once the wire's in place, that's as far as the jib will go. If he really had to, we could secure, release the wire from the jib and pull a pin and actually extend that jib out another couple feet. Problem is, once it's extended, it won't retract all the way. So it's you got to figure out your placement of your jib before you get started. He's got lots of room there now, and he does have that piece of rubber on the primary right above his head. So it's important to note when you're doing hotline work that you can't be holding on to the pole with one hand and onto primary with the other. They call that putting yourself in series or testing your gloves. We can, however, have a phase in the jib. The jib is tested, the bucket's tested, and of course he is wearing his 20 kV gloves. But at no point would he ever reach up and grab a hold of that wire and while he's touching the pole, and certainly not another phase. So these pins where they're down through the crossarm, and there's a nut on the bottom side. There's actually a lock nut that goes into place, and man, traffic's getting busy there now. The lock nut actually folds up and wraps around the nut, and they can be a real pain to take apart. It's made of steel, and generally I have to take a screwdriver, pliers, and pry the tabs off. That's where the nut's on the bottom side, so it doesn't back off and drop to the ground. So that's why it took him a few minutes just to get that nut off there. And he's got the new pin and new insulator. The threads are likely pretty worn underneath that old porcelain one, so we did decide to change both. You also want to make sure that when you tighten down that bolt that your insulator is lined up to, there's a little slot in the top the wire sits in. If it's a corner pull, it doesn't matter as much, although it is still a lot easier to tie onto the insulator if that slot is lined up with the crossarm or with the direction of the wire. So now that everything is all tight, he's going to put his blanket back around the crossarm, being careful to try to put the blanket on in such a way that it actually even covers the pin underneath that insulator. You are going to use, of course, a hotline tie with the ends curled up so you don't have loose ends swinging around. He's basically going to put some down pressure on that insulator. So he's using his hand to help control the wire as he lowers it down right on top of that insulator, and then put a slight down pressure. Now the down pressure is against the keeper door, so you do want to make sure that it is fully closed. If you're doing a job that you're going to have a lot of down pressure on your jib. You can actually spin the jaw right upside down so that the pressure is not on the door portion. In this particular circumstance, he was putting some up pressure and down pressure, so you can also see that as he rolls that wire around where the loop is, you want to position the loop lineways with the wire. You don't want to actually unwind it. You position the loop lineways, and as you wrap it around, it'll give you a little bit of leverage to naturally keep that aluminum tie wire tight. And then he's just going to give it a little bit of a final snug with his pliers here, and then fold over the top. You want to fold those tops over so that you don't have sharp edges if in the future you ever do have to rubber up this structure. Now, he will be removing the blanket here, as he's not going to be working on that phase anymore, but he's going to leave that rubber eel in place, maybe even add another one. And that's so that when he goes between the phases and the neutral, he's covered on both ends, just some extra protection. Be covered from both the 3-phase up top and the neutral. This, even though we lowered that neutral, it's going to be a tight squeeze. So where we didn't plan on doing both pins initially, I did go down and grab the extra equipment for him, and I did have to wait until he was clear of the high voltage in order to pass him over the rest of the equipment. And here we're just speeding things up a little bit because it's a pretty slow process, squeeze through the phases when it's this tight. So you can see his bag is dragging up over the neutral a little bit, and it's pretty heavy. It has all of his eels in it. So we just indicate to him to keep an eye on his bag. Before he moves any further, he clears the bag of the neutral and carries on to squeeze through. If this was a 2-man bucket, or if there was a double bucket on there, he would have put a second eel on that center phase as well to cover the passenger. So this one here is a bit tricky. Again, I mentioned the position of the jib. He's got the pin right in the center point, so he does have to wiggle his way back and forth through a little bit, and then he's able to rotate that jib. He's actually going to, so you can see here, he flips the head of the jib around, where I mentioned you can change it so the pressure is not against the gate. But this side here, he's going to repeat the exact same process, except for before he goes up and grabs a hold of that phase, it's already floating with lots of clearance over top. He's just going to change that pin. He can reach it quite safely right from here, and he'll put a new pin and insulator in. So repeating the same process, I skipped through here a little bit, but the jib wouldn't quite extend high enough to reach that phase, so I did go up and over top of the structure, and I used my hot stick to push that phase down into his keeper. So as long as the phase is fully controlled, I pushed the phase down with my hot stick until he was able to coordinate both his rubber glove and the keeper to grab a hold of it, and then he used the jib to finally pull that down onto the insulator, at which point he had the blanket in place and tied it. So you'll see here he's right up in between those phases. It's important to have rubber both in front and behind you whenever you're working in between phases like that. If you're ever putting a jumper over the structure, doing an impact or something, you want to make sure that phase behind you is covered up in case you back up and back into it or hit your elbow into it. So a pretty straightforward job. We're pretty well completely lost our daylight now. I'm just going back up to re-energize that pilot wire. And I'm just going to use a quick connect. I think they're made by Tyco. We call them Simels, S-I-M-E-L, if you guys were asking. They're real nice because you don't have to skin the wire. They're really safe and easy to use on live connections. So the portion of my left hand is the dead side. The right hand is the live side. All you got to do is jam those two wires. Kind of tricky to hold it in place sometimes. And you don't have to torque these guys either because they do have a breakaway nut on them. It's a double nut actually. So you put your Milwaukee impact on the first nut, tighten it until it snaps off. And if you ever have to remove it, there is a second nut that's a slightly different size to remove that connector if ever need be.
All right, so that went well when we got up there and checked the roadside insulator, as we saw. It was loose too, probably from the constant up pressure, vibration on the line, wore down the threads. Anyway, so we changed both the insulator and the pin as well on that road phase. So we're going to surrender our hold off now and head into the substation, return the reclosing. We still got one more job to do after this. I'm at 11 hours. I can go 14 today, so this next job's going to put us pretty close. That's a good thing because it's freezing cold out there today. Here, I want to bring up that hold off 147037. Okay, surrendering our hold off 147037 on 8013 line. All work has been completed as planned, and all men are clear and structured remain clear.
You're surrendering your hold off 147037 on 8013 line. All men are clear and structure remain clear, and work was completed as planned.
10-4, that's correct.
Return to service the automatic reclosing on 6507B003 and remove hold off tag 147037 from the breaker and reclosing handle and report.
10-4, you set up sub. I can go ahead and return to service the automatic reclosing on 6507B003 and remove hold off tag 147037 from breaker and recloser control handle and report. Let's head inside. Thankfully, these buildings are all heated, and before you do return your reclosing, even though it's just in here, you do want to verify your tag, the information on it, that it is your tag. There could be multiple tags, and of course you want to verify your breaker. And we will return our reclosing, and that's it. We're gonna head back up to the truck and report our steps. Even though I was just going into that building from the gate right straight through the building, dispatch does have to be aware that we're in there, and you must be wearing all your FR and PPE in case the real unlucky chance that something in there fails as you're walking by. Service the automatic reclosing on 6507B003 and remove hold off tag 147037 from breaker and recloser control handles.
You return to service the automatic reclosing on 6507B003 and remove hold off tag 147037 from the breaker and reclosing control handles.
10-4.
Fair enough, nothing else, 21 clear.
Yeah, the two guys on call are going to head over to that reconnect with me. We got to run a loop off-road there, and I think that's the last call I got there, eh? We'll probably be about an hour over there.
We'll do, I'll put a copy on him.
Excellent, thank you very much. 182 clear.
21 clear.
That's it, guys. We do, it's not very often I get the chance to capture rubber glove work. Simple reason that I run a trouble truck. Most of my jobs I show up are de-energized because power is out or something's wrong. But our company does do rubber glove work pretty well every day. There's certain guys that are assigned to the rubber glove truck. There's a lead hand on the rubber glove. However, all of our guys that are journeyman linemen at our company are certified to do rubber glove work. We can take any single one of our journeyman linemen from the office and do rubber glove work as long as they're comfortable. There's guys, myself included, I haven't done a whole lot of rubber glove work. I've done 2 or 3 jobs like that in the last 5 or 7 years. But back in the day, I was on a rubber glove truck, did full double, triple circuit transfers and stuff hot. It's some pretty neat stuff. It's a lot harder to capture as well, because when you get into the complicated jobs, you don't really want a camera watching every move, because regardless of how comfortable you are with it, it can be in the back of your mind and distract focus on the task at hand a little bit. And you also don't want to have the GoPro, for example, you don't want to have a GoPro attached to you while doing glove work, because it can interfere with your clearances and such. So we captured this entire one from my bucket. Even when I was grabbing some material for my partner there, I'm not allowed to hand him material from my bucket when he's on the phase. If he's got that phase-ins jib, my bucket is not certified for our glove work, so I can't even hand him something. If I was in another truck like his, then I could. So as I was handing material, he had to clear off from the lines. Once he was clear, I could hand the stuff over and then go back on the lines. But anyways, glad we had the opportunity to share that one with you guys. I've got all kinds of stuff. I'm not sure which order I'm going to be releasing this stuff. We've got a 556 MCM splice that we captured. We've got a broken neutral job, which I think that won't be pretty easy to edit, so I'll probably release that pretty soon, unless it comes out before this video, which it might. We've got some equipment from SensorLink coming up that we've covered its use on a few unique jobs. Cold load pickup that gave us some problems closing the line in during the storm, and we use the SensorLink amp stick to help us troubleshoot that. And we've also got proximity indicator. Some people were wondering if you get false readings, what to do. We're going to be covering that. Anyways, I'm sure 80% of you people stopped watching this video by now because I'm rambling on, but I appreciate you guys watching, really do. And if you have any questions, leave it in the comments below. I'll try my best to answer it. We've got some awesome viewers that answer a lot of other people's questions, probably better than I could with some of the real technical stuff. So appreciate that. See you guys all soon, and be safe.